Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen, where the madness continues. It's now part 5 of my DIY 370Z 370GT twin turbo build. As you can see here, the driver side exhaust manifold has been remade and everything's looking pretty damn sweet with that now. Both exhaust manifolds look quite similar to each other, particularly in this area. The main difference is the area at the back, but other than that, they're quite symmetrical, which is always a good look. Various progress has been made on the build, and I figure it's about time I turn the camera on. So, exactly where are we? As I said, manifold's done, one on the other side's done, turbo position's finalised. So now I can start looking at a lot of the plumbing. All lines, water lines, turbo drains, air in and out, etc. Being that it's the Christmas New Year period, there's not a lot of shops open, so unfortunately I'm having to chop and change between things that I'm doing quite a bit. I don't have a lot of gas left, so I don't really want to set up to weld out the turbo manifolds and get only part way into it and then run completely out of gas when I can use the gas for tacking other stuff together, which is what I've been doing. So I'll run you through stuff that I've done, stuff that I'm doing, and we'll have a bit of a look, eh? So, where's the front of the car? Oh, there we go. Hang on, I'll just lift this up. You can see the intercooler's mounted on the front of the car there. Not that you can really get much of a good look at it, but I'll drop the car down in a bit. We'll have a bit of a better look at that. I've been hard at it, folks, making various bits and pieces for the build. I'll just zoom in. This water outlet on the back here. There's normally a hard pipe that connects into this, and it runs across over the top of the exhaust manifold over here. It's actually very, very close to this, and I need room for a heat shield that I'm going to build over this part of the exhaust manifold. So what I've had to do is get rid of this hard line, which I'll give you a bit of a look at what it was. So it's sort of a two-piece arrangement. This one here originally went into there, I think. Seems about right. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, so that went into there and then came across over the top of this exhaust manifold here. But yeah, way too close, not enough room for it anymore. It took me a while to work out what I was actually going to do with this, whether I was going to make a whole new piece, whether I was going to be able to adapt something out of the original piece. But the conclusion that I came to in the end was if I cut the pipe off, it was almost the exact size that I would need to tap a thread into the inside of it with a 3/8 NPT tap, which is what I did. I happen to have a -10 to 3/8 NPT adapter. So the piece that goes into there, that's normally on the end of this fella, I tapped it, 3/8 NPT. It's just a round piece that goes in there with an O-ring on it. The biggest issue with tapping it was gripping it without damaging it. 3/8 NPT is quite a reasonable size tap, and to grip something that's round is no easy feat. I'll just show you what I did. So to tap something that's round like that, you need to be able to clamp it really firmly in a vise, and because of the shape of it, it's almost impossible to do. So what I've done here, I've just got a piece of aluminium scrap and bored a hole through it, which matches the exact size of the round piece that I was trying to hold, and cut a slot in it, and then just clamp that together in the vise, and that gives you a really, really good grip on the part. Gives you lots of surface area to contact. I've cut a relief cut in the back here, which allows it to clamp in a little bit tighter, a little bit easier, sorry. I did make that on my mini lathe, but if you didn't have access to a lathe, all you have to do is just use a hole saw. Drill a hole as close as you can get it through anything. Look, even a piece of wood will work to give you enough clamping force on a round item so that you don't destroy it while trying to clamp it, and it also locks in position so that you can do a process like tapping or something like that. So just a tip for young players there, folks. So yeah, tap it to 3/8 NPT, put an adapter in, and now I can just jump straight into AN10 hose on here. This isn't the fitting that I'll be using on there. This is a a 90. I'm actually using a 45, same thing, 400 series hose, a push lock stuff. But I need it to come out on this angle here, but that's just sort of a stopgap, just so I know what I've got and sort of where I'm going with it. Also on the back of the engine here, there's a little bit going on. This is one of the hoses that runs to the heater inside the vehicle. This fitting here I bought from Z1 Motorsports in the US. It's where I will be starting the water feed line for the water cooling of the turbos. You can see I've got a dash 6 fitting on there and just a 90 to sort of slip through this area here, and that gives me the first cold water feed into the driver's side turbo core. Now, like I say, this fitting here I bought from Z1 Motorsports a few years ago. A lot of stuff I bought years and years ago, or a few years ago, back when the Aussie dollar was at parity with the US dollar, so I was able to buy a whole heap of stuff for a really good price and just put it away on the shelves, which is why you'll probably notice that a lot of the components in this build are all sourced from the US, which is a little bit cost prohibitive now with the way the dollar is and the fact that import costs have gone up and even shipping costs have gone up substantially to get stuff out of the US. So I actually needed another one and I only had one, so I found a way to get another one, because this size hose is actually not that common on this sort of thing. So what I have here is a piece that I bought on eBay. I think it's for a BA Falcon. Now, what it apparently was for was to replace a plastic joiner, and there was also down the bottom here, it was tapped and had a fitting on it, which I think may have been for an aftermarket temperature sensor. At the time, you could buy these quite easily on eBay. I don't know if they're still on there. I assume that they probably are. And the hose size matches what I need for this engine. So now this goes in the same position on this side over here, basically into the other side of the heater hose, and performs the same task. It's a water supply line for the turbos. So what I've done here is I've just used a -6 AN weld-on fitting on this end, drilled it out, and that gives me my my hose point where I can then run a hose into it. And on the 370 GT in this position over here, this fitting actually has a bleeder in the top, and it's really important for bleeding your cooling system when you're filling it up, that bleeder is still there. So rather than get rid of the bleeder, all I did, I just tapped the fitting on the top, 1/8 NPT. I've got a stainless -4 adapter, and just with an AN cap, so that I can just use that as the bleed valve for the cooling system when it's all said and done. These AN caps seal extremely well. Probably already shown them to you, but on the front of the engine where I've had the oil feed set up for the turbos for years, it's all just capped off with these AN caps, and I haven't had one single leak from any of it for all the years it's been sitting there. So they're a very good thing. So I've made that, or modified that, ready to go. That's another piece that I've been working on. So as I say, this sits over on this side and gives you another water feed position for your passenger side turbo. At this stage, I think that's about all that's going on the back of the engine, so I might move around to the passenger side. Alrighty, so here we are on the passenger side. You can see the turbo is sitting there with the manifold all still tacked together like it was at the end of the last episode. 100% certain about the final position of this turbo. It's all good. As I mentioned earlier, it'd be great to weld them all out. I really don't have the gas to do it. My supplier is closed down once again for the Christmas New Year period, so I am just soldering on, doing whatever I can, whenever I can. You can see there are plumbing fittings that have been put onto the turbo here. The rotation of the turbo core has been worked out to minimise any potential clearance issues. There's a little bit of a thing going on here with the solenoid for the starter motor, but that's not a problem. That's a pretty simple thing to work out. Behind the turbo here, there was a water feed line here. Now, this was one of the original lines that went to the oil cooler warmer fitting that goes on the side of the block underneath your oil filter. It's an item that I think is standard on all the JDM 370 GTs. I removed that about a couple of years ago because I'm now running a Mocal thermostatic sandwich plate, which gives me output to the front mount oil cooler that I have on the vehicle. So this is redundant, and what I did, I looped this back. The other end of that actually connects, where are we, up into this fitting up here, which is sitting over here. So that's one end of the loop, and the other end, this guy goes on here, and this lane pipe sticking out of this end, it sort of snakes around under the engine, and these things both snaked around across to the other side of the motor, and that formed the flow through, the coolant flow through for the oil warmer cooler bizzo. So all I did was just run a hose from one end to the other. I just put a loop on it once I deleted the unit, so water was just continuing to flow through. Main reason being I didn't have access in behind the exhaust manifold that was here to do anything with it. So it's going. I've just knocked up a bit of aluminium, bit of billet aluminium, just from some scrap here in the shed, and that'll take the place of this guy. So that'll just bolt on the block as per this original piece did, and that closes that off. Now, as for this guy here, it's going to be completely replaced. As you see, it's fouling on the manifold here. I plan on making heat shields for the turbo manifold, so this is all just in the way. It doesn't really fit anyway. As I said earlier, this pipe here joins up with the one around the back where I have the AN fitting. So what I'm in the process of doing is making up a big aluminium block to bolt onto here that I can then put two fittings on there. I need to put a dash 12 and a dash 10 AN to bring these up and route them to the locations that they need to go. This pipe here will just be blanked off. It'll just be completely closed over in that spot, which is not a drama. A lot of the vehicles don't even have this set up here. I don't think the 370Zs have it. And it's just blanked off on this piece from the factory. There's just no pipe and no hole coming out of there. So that's another section there that I'm sort of in the process of working on. I don't have a piece of billet for this. I've ordered something. Once again, I'm stuck with the whole Christmas, New Year's, nothing being bloody open. But I've got plenty to go on with, so it's not that much of a big deal. Back around on the driver's side, folks. Same deal as I mentioned. Oil and water lines and all that sort of stuff are being sorted out. I'm starting to put all the fittings in place so I can start working out lengths for the line. The outlet from the compressor on this side is giving me a few issues because of the steering rack location. I can't spin the cover around enough to run the hose in behind the engine mount, which is what all the guys in the US do when they have their turbos in this location. So that's giving me a bit of grief. So I have to run it across here. The body shell is very, very close here. It actually sits on this piece here, as you can see, because it's nice and smooth. But there is a little bit of a gap here. So my plan is at this stage to just weld on a 90 down here in this position. But as you can see, obviously it doesn't bloody fit. So it's blocked by this mount that runs down from up here. You can sort of see it on the body somewhere. It's basically this position here. This big square block is what sits on top of that that alloy area there with a hole through it, and you can see we do have a bit of a small gap here. Not that that's really of a whole lot of use. So as I say, I've really got to get this pipe going down through here. I've got another one of these, and what I've done is I've sectioned it up just on the bandsaw and increased the radius of the bend by doing that, and I've also cut quite a bit off it so that I can weld this together and it still gives me a reasonable radius bend, and put that on there. I'm also going to take the compressor cover off, cut about 20mm off the end of the compressor cover here, and then weld all this in position on the right angle, so I can then just put a silicon coupler on it and then drop down into here, which is where the pipe needs to go on its way down to the intercooler. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm just sort of setting up to start welding these pieces together. I'm about to get the compressor cover off so I can sort of sort it out. So that's where I'm at. I might do that. So since you guys are here now, I don't know where the bloody hell yous have been. A lot's been going on. But anyway, since yous are here now, we might as well do this together. So bear with me, folks. I'll get this cover off and we'll cut a bit off it. Compressor's in the bandsaw, folks. Time for a bit of chop chop. Rightio, back at the bench, folks. This is our piece that goes on in that position with the join there. I don't know if you can see, but the compressor housing is really thick in this position just down here. That's just the way they make it because of this kind of dogleg shape in it here. So what I'll do, just to smooth that transition out a little bit, I'll just mark this with our old friend, the black texture. And I'll just knock a bit of that out with the die grinder. I'll probably just use a flat wheel, I reckon. You don't want to go, it's pretty easy to sort of hook into the aluminium a little bit too ambitiously at times. So I think I'll just throw this in my little vise down here and just have a little bit of a go at it with the flat wheel. I think that should do it. Yep, that's pretty good now, folks. Don't know if you can see that, but that lip's no longer there. We've just got a bit of a nice transition. So I think we're pretty much ready to set it back up on the engine. You can see all the joins have been V'd out in all these, just so we've got a decent bit of penetration. We don't have a big giant weld sitting on the top. So yeah, we'll get the compressor cover back on, sit the turbo back on the motor, and we'll start kind of taping these things together and working out exactly what our angle's going to be. Compressor covers back on, folks. I've got all my little pieces just sort of duct taped together here. Left myself a little bit of a spot where I can just throw a couple of quick tacks on and then start taking the tape off. I think that gives me exactly what I need. I've got a bit of clearance underneath it, and I'm shooting straight past the engine mount here, straight down into this area here, which is where I want to go to get my pipe through, which will still allow me to get the oil filter on and off, and I should be pretty bloody good to go, I reckon. Rightio, I'll go and weld this up. And there we have it. That was actually a bit crap to weld up, really. Your best Chinese cast aluminium bends aren't what they used to be, I guess, kind of, sort of. Anyway, it's a bit shit to weld up, particularly for someone like me who's not a welder, but it'll do the job, folks. Righto, I'll just line this up with the compressor housing, and we'll weld this onto the compressor housing next. So I decided just to give it a bit of a tune up on a flat wheel, folks, just because I couldn't stand looking at it. It looked a bit crap, even just the outside casting, apart from my crappy welds. And I've run a flat wheel through the middle of it just to sort of clean up. The casting was sort of quite daggy, and there's all sorts of lumps and bumps in it, but it's quite clean and tidy now. You can see on the inside, outside, meh, doesn't look too bad. So what I'm going to do now is just position this on the compressor cover and mark it, and then I'll take the compressor cover back off the turbo and we'll weld her on. And there we go, folks. While it certainly isn't pretty, it's definitely done, and that's the main thing. The alignment's good on the inside, it's very nice. I find it very hard to weld this cast stuff, being that I'm not a welder, and been a while since I've done some aluminium stuff. I don't really have my welder dialed in, but enough of me making excuses for my shit work. It's done, and that's absolutely fine. I'm very happy with that. It is what it is. It can live there happily. I don't think it's going to crack anywhere. Like I say, the alignment's good, and that's all that matters, really. One more step in the process, and on to the next bit. Similar thing needs to happen on the passenger side, folks. I've got another bend here. It's much simpler. On this side, it's just going to be a matter of cutting a bit off it and just welding it straight onto the compressor cover. It'll just sit under here, somewhere like this, and just direct the pipe so I can put another 90 on and then just bring it back around behind the engine mount here. Pretty simple, really. Much simpler than the other side. So I'll start setting up for this. Just while I got the passenger side turbo off, folks, this is the water pipe I was talking about earlier. It's the feed line to the oil cooler warmer that I've replaced with a thermostatic sandwich plate. And this is the block off plate that I've made for it. I'll just pull this bit of tape off here. Bit of coolant coming out of there. I'll just get that off. Beautiful. Clean him up a bit. And put the block off plate on. The original gasket is still in really good condition, so I'm going to reuse it because I'm a tight ass, and it should be absolutely fine. One more job ticked off the list. Fantastic. Click. Click. Talk to perfection. So simple, folks. When you're making block off plates and stuff, there's really nothing technical about it. I didn't use a lot of fancy tools or anything for that. It's just a piece of aluminium bar stock which you can basically pick up anywhere. Bits of it on eBay or whatever, and just cut it out with just some hand tools and shape it to whatever you need, and away you go. You don't need to particularly buy anything. Very simple thing to make. Yes, job's done. Righto, back to the regular program. Righto, so the passenger side turbo's back on. I've done a bit of work on this elbow. I've cut it off to where I think I need to. Cleaned it up a bit on the outside because they're pretty horrid looking things. Been through the inside just with a flat wheel again. just to not trying to get it looking super good in there, but just to get rid of all of the lumpy bumpy dags sort of hanging off it, and just, you know, just get rid of the worst really. It doesn't need to be perfectly smooth or anything, but you know, they're pretty crap, these these bloody Chinese cast aluminium elbows, but what do you do? They're cheap, easy to get. Anyway, so this is roughly where it's going in here, and that gets me clearance with the high tension lead to the starter motor. Should be able to sneak around in behind it over the top, and I also go between the engine mount here and the starter motor solenoid, and that'll allow for me to then get a silicon coupling on the other side, doing a 90, which will bring it out the other side of the engine mount over here. So then I can just drop down into this recess, come down underneath, and come into the intercooler out the front. So I'll get this off and weld her up, and we'll have another look at it. Well, there you go, folks. It looks like I'm finally getting the welder and myself dialed in. Now that I'm all finished, which is always the way. Anyway, that's bloody hot. I'll reassemble this turbo, and I'll put it back on the side of the motor, and we can have a look at it all mounted up. So there you go, folks. She's now back in position, and all looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I'll swing around this other side, and I'll give you a look from the other side. It looks a bit nicer. There you go. That gives you a bit of a better idea of the whys and the wherefores. So you can see this is just sneaking in between the engine mount here, starter motor solenoid there, and it just gets me in a really good spot for the next piece. Now you're probably thinking, Jesus Christ, Trevor, you've gone mad. Why are you welding all these pieces onto the compressor covers of your bloody turbos? Why don't you just use silicon joiners? Well, I am going to use silicon joiners, but the problem is when you have a complex little area like this, you end up in a position where you have to stack silicon joiners, which means you have to put little bits of pipe and then have 190, a silicon 90 with a little bit of pipe on the end, then go into another silicon 90 with that sort of turned around, so you end up with all these joins, and they're just terrible. And firstly, it's really hard to get to all the clamps to hold the joins on properly, and secondly, it just really sucks. It costs you a fortune in silicon joiners, and it's an absolute pain in the ass. So anywhere where you have sort of a complex thing like this, where it's going to be really hard to get to later, it's always a good idea if you can weld your first elbow onto the outlet on the compressor housing. But you have to be aware that it has to be in such a fashion that you can still remove the turbo, which is the only issue, because obviously a silicon joiner you can take off and use that to get the turbo out or whatever. So you've just got to make sure that you are still able to remove the turbo, which I am, when this goes on, and it just means there's a whole heap less crap going on when it comes time to bring this out through here. As it stands, I'm going to have to put a silicon 90 on the back, and then I'll use a 90-degree mandrel bend to drop down the chassis and into that lower section down in here. So hopefully I'll only have one silicon joiner behind this engine mount, and that should be a sort of a pretty good scenario. So I might leave this video there, folks. It's been a bit all over the place, just because the whole bloody Christmas New Year thing, not being able to get stuff. You know, as you'd recall, I've made all sorts of bits and pieces. I've got a whole heap more AN fittings. I don't even talk about the bags and bags of AN fittings I actually have here in the Aussie shed. And do you think I've got all the fittings I need? No bloody way. You just never ever have the right amount, the right fittings in the right angles and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's my problem. At this stage, everything's going along nicely. Turbo manifolds are finished, other than being welded out. All the locations are really good. Everything's working really good. I've even been planning out where I'm going to run the external wastegates and all that sort of stuff. So everything's looking really good. And like you saw at the beginning of the video, the front mount intercooler's in on the vehicle, mounted up on the front. I'll show you a bit more of that on the next video, where it's a bit more relevant. But at this stage, I think we'll just call it there. Like I say, mate, I'm all over the shop at the moment, and I think that's about all the serious progress that I've made over this Christmas period. Christmas is always a bit of a pain in the bum when you're doing this sort of stuff because all the shops are shut and you always need stuff that's a bit unforeseen. I've been under the pump as well. Mrs. Aussie Shed actually fractured a spine putting up Christmas decorations at the start of December. So I've been playing the role of Mr. Mum and looking after Mrs. Aussie Shed. She's only just gotten out of hospital on Christmas Eve. So that's held me back with a lot of this as well. So never fear, folks. Work is continuing. That's just where we are at this stage. So as always, thanks for stopping by the Aussie Shed. Always a pleasure to have you here. Hope you're enjoying what I'm doing here, guys. If you like my videos, remember to like and subscribe, leave a comment, and as always, I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.